my pleasure to introduce our amazing speaker for tonight's program. Rabbi David Ingber is the founder and senior rabbi of Romavu, New York City. Named by Newsweek and the Forward as one of the 50 most influential rabbis in America, Rabbi David is considered a major 21st century Jewish thinker and educator. His rich perspective and full-bodied approach to Jewish learning has brought him to speak throughout North America, Europe, and Israel. Rabbi David's distinctive approach to Torah and Jewish practice is informed by his own personal seeking and learning from a wide cross-section of sacred traditions, including mysticism and Hasidut. Rabbi David has taught at the Academy for Jewish Religion, JTS, the 92nd Street Y, Padres, and more. He is a fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute. Rabbi David studied at several distinguished yeshivot in Jerusalem and New York, and was ordained in 2004 by Rabbi Salman Schachter Shlomi, founder of Renewal Judaism. We are so honored to present Rabbi David to you this evening.
Thank you, Maria. And I'm going to use this for a bit, and then I'm going to be moving around. How's this, Sarah? Is it okay?
Actually, it's better now.
Not better?
It's better. It's better.
It's better. And also thank you to Sarah. Thank you for all the work that you did to make this happen. You were persistent, and as someone who was trying to get a hold of me today said, you're a hard guy to nail down. And I said, well, it's good you got me in the car, because that's where you can catch me. And you caught me in a number of different places and really shepherded this evening. So thank you so much, Sarah, for all the work you did. So hi, everybody. My name is David Ingber. As I was introduced, you can call me David, and we're just going to have a schmooze tonight. I'm really glad to come out to New Jersey for many levels. One is because my wife's family is from New Jersey, and they always tell me that I have to go out to New Jersey more frequently. So I feel as though, thank you for helping me have a better relationship with my wife's family. One, too, is that in my old age, I've become a huge Bruce fan. I'm pretty sure none of you here know who Bruce is. Bruce Springsteen. And Bruce. So I was lucky enough a couple weeks ago to go to his show. A friend of mine brought to the show. And the only thing that could upstage Bruce was that President Obama was there too. So, but my coming down here is a kind of homage to him as well, and saying thank you to Bruce and to your influence on my life. And next, of course, it's, all jokes aside, it's really profound to come and talk about this, because it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart, something that I think about almost every moment of the day. On some level, this question of what's happening with synagogues, temples, shuls, shtibels, Beit Knesset, Batei Knesset, all this question of what do we do with the sacred center that is eroding in the United States and North America broadly. And what, if anything, I think the question that we were asking in this this title was, what, if anything, can we learn from some of the communities and synagogue models that have emerged in the last couple of decades? And maybe more radically, is the synagogue, is the renaissance of Jewish life that many who are involved in Jewish life anticipate, hope for, pray for, yearn for. Does the synagogue play a role, or what role does it play? Is the writing on the wall? And I think that part of what I'm hoping to explore with you tonight is that I think that the answer, of course, to all those questions, rhetorical, obviously, is that the synagogue has a major role to play in the future of 21st century North American Judaism, and that more richly and broadly, I think that the synagogue has always played a role in our people's survival, and that it has to play a central and essential role in its future. So let me begin with a qualification that my bona fides notwithstanding, let's be honest. I'm not a sociologist of North American Jewish life. I am not an expert. I am not one of the researchers who did a tremendous amount of research in Synagogue 2000 and then in Synagogue 2000. Most of their work is what I'll be presenting tonight too, and then having some fun listening to some of the things that are up for you guys, or up, what I've learned. So a little about me in terms of, I'm certainly not an expert, but let me tell you what brought me here tonight. I spent the most formative years of my life before the rabbinate as a time-honored career stepping stone towards opening up your own synagogue. I opened up my own synagogue in 2006 in New York City. Part-time, we went full-time in 2008. So this is our 10th year as a full-time community. We, at one point, we grew very quickly. My stage, my apprenticeship was, I spent most of my 20s as a waiter in New York City. That was essentially how I made a living. By night, by day I was a yoga instructor and a Pilates instructor and a gyrotonic instructor, and I was very involved in Tai Chi and alternative healing modalities. I went back to school for philosophy. All that was by day. But by night, you could find me, if you liked Carmine's, you could find me on Upper West Side. Some of you, the ones who are laughing have been there and know, and maybe, did I serve you guys? I could have been. I was in the Baines. I was like, the Baines, oh my gosh, you guys are always in section 4. Always happens that way. I'm so happy to see you again. I'll get you your double espresso. I'll be right back. So that's, I was in the service industry. Now, of course, tongue-in-cheek, but it was really profound to do that work. Because I learned a lot about myself and about service and about what it is to be of service and to be in service. And I brought a lot of that with me when I became a rabbi. My real bona fides are that I grew up in a very shul-centered community in Great Neck, Long Island, the son of Berlin Jews who were really not Berlin Jews. They're real Polish, Ostjuden. We were very Polish, Hasidic in nature, but for 3 generations my father's family had been in Berlin and had run away from Berlin in 1938, about 4 months before Kristallnacht. And my father grew up in Forest Hills in Queens, and that was a shout out for Forest Hills. There you go. Going to shul every Shabbat with his father was a very important part of their family legacy. And we grew up like that. We grew up going to shul every Shabbat morning, every Shabbat morning going to temple. It was a very important part of our life. The Orthodox community we belonged to was very deeply committed Orthodox. We were modern Orthodox Jews, and I grew up in that way. I went to day schools. So I was very shul-centered from a very young age. And I went to an Orthodox day school, and when I was 18, I went to Israel for a year to study between high school and college. And I'm one of those kids, it was 1987, I'm one of those kids that in the classical technical terminology, I flipped out. It's actually a phrase, flipping out. So I went from being a modern Orthodox kid on his way to a good school back here in the States to a ultra-Orthodox Haredi, 19-year-old in Jerusalem with my modern Orthodox parents in Great Neck, going, oh my God. What happened? And the trajectory of my life shifted radically. My classmates had gone on, and my twin brother had gone on to the life, and I became completely saturated in the world of ultra-Orthodox Judaism for 6 years. And when I finally emerged, I wound up living in New York City and becoming a waiter. So that's the longer story. And what happened during that decade of leaving ultra-Orthodoxy and Orthodoxy and living in New York City without any connection whatsoever with Judaism at all, other than living on the Upper West Side, which is, of course, a shtet. What happened was that I, in a way, stepped out of almost every assumption about what Jewish life was and rejected it. But what didn't go away was my desire for spirituality. And so instead of being able to go to shul and pray, I went to yoga studios and meditated. Instead of going to synagogue and learning Torah, I went right, to a class on the Bhagavad Gita. Instead of doing Gemilut Chesed, I got very involved in Seva, which is a kind of shirut, which is service. Can you hear me without this? Not so well? Not that well?
There's a lot of noise in the back.
There is no, okay, so I'll keep doing it because it's going in and out. So, this removal of myself from all of the assumptions and the inherited assumptions about what religious life looked like, to become a seeker, and to know that even though I was no longer involved in Jewish life, I was still seeking something profound and universal and real, and it took on different forms. It opened my eyes to question things that I had not questioned before when I then eventually came back to Jewish life. How I came back to Jewish life is that I was, just to make the story, just to close the loop, I was in my early 30s living in Tel Aviv, teaching Pilates to the Bat Sheva dance company in southern Tel Aviv, and a friend of mine whose father had started a modern Orthodox seminary on the Upper West Side, I won't say what it is, but it's called Open Orthodox, and said, where are you with your spiritual journey? Have you come back to Judaism yet? I said, well, it just happened to be that over the course of the last 2 years, I've re-engaged my spiritual life here in Tel Aviv, and I have been thinking about whether or not I would go back to the rabbinate at some point. And so I came back to modern Orthodoxy for 2 years. When I eventually realized that I was never going to be a modern Orthodox Jew ideologically ever again, for a lot of reasons, I won't go into them right now, I then left and met my teacher, Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, who gave me ordination in 2004. I started Roman this community in 2006, and we have 1,000 members at this point, and we're growing. And so let's look at a short story. Now, the community that I started in 2006 was patterned on what I saw in my teacher's ministry, in Reb Zalman's life. My teacher, for those of you who've never heard of Reb Zalman, how many of you have never heard of Reb Zalman? Or how many people have heard of Reb Zalman? Have. So for those of you who've never heard of Reb Zalman, you should ask one of these people. Right? Some of you, raise your hands again if you've heard of Reb Zalman, because you've had an experience, you've read something. Right? So I'd love it if people were to walk over to somebody and at some point in the next 2 hours or maybe afterwards and say, what was your experience with him? He was a great religious thinker, a great religious individual, a great spirit. He was the founder of what is called Jewish Renewal, but it's hard to know what Jewish Renewal is. Is it a denomination? Is it a movement? It has some of the features of the kind of denominational structure, but it's not. It has a rabbinical school, and it has its own methodologies, and it has its own communities that are affiliated with it. But it is, at its core, a way of looking at the tradition through a frame that renews the tradition. It could renew orthodoxy, it could renew conservatism, it could renew renewal, it could renew reform. It's a set of questions about a system that we'll get into in a moment, a set of questions that help peel away a certain familiarity with the things and the structures and the ways of it, to see something deeper potentially that might then allow greater creativity, greater flexibility, greater dexterity with a given form. So when I started the community, it was rooted in this, let's start from scratch and build it from scratch. If we were going to start from scratch, what would this look like? What would this feel like? And I'm going to get to a little bit more of my personal story. I'm going to tell a little bit of some of the things that we did over the course of the last decade. Some of them are applicable, some are not. But I tell you the story just to tell you a little bit where I'm coming from. For me, I'm here tonight as a seeker. I'm here tonight as someone who chose to come back to a Jewish life even though I was born into it. I'm here tonight with you as someone, for all intents and purposes, if you had caught me at different moments in the arc of my personal narrative, you might have found me saying, I will never set foot in a synagogue ever again in my life, or saying, I never want to leave the synagogue. And so in some way, at every moment that I'm in my own synagogue, I'm aware that I'm lucky because I can essentially do what I want. You know, I've set it up in that way that I can navigate according to my own compass, which is of course very freeing, but also I'm held also by not an obligation to the community, but an obligation to something that transcends my individual community. That when I make choices, there's something bigger that I have to align myself with. And I don't have to, but I choose. And so I want to adopt that perspective with all of you here tonight, which is, what would it look like if you and me would recognize that nothing makes us do any of this? And that's the case also for those who walk through the door. And if there's nothing compulsory, how do we begin to not have to but want to? How do we make synagogue life so exciting, relevant, meaningful, applicable, nutritious, nourishing, that you'd have to be crazy not to want to go? What else are you going to do? Go to Soul Cycle? Because the reality is that we live in a marketplace where people are all of God's chosen people are no longer chosen, they are choosing. We are God's chosen people, and each and every human being is a choosing person. And so what does it take? What are the motivations? What are the factors that are the ingredients of people making choices that all of us, we wouldn't be here if we didn't think that they were the right choice. We kind of believe that going to synagogue or being involved in a synagogue is actually pertinent and relevant and important. So how do we do that? And then I also want to question that assumption too. Because that is also an extreme formulation where choice is so, like that's kind of borrowing from the marketplace. So we'll come to a different frame for that too. But before we go any further and hear any more of my story, I want to hear more of yours. And I want you to share your stories with other people. So if you could turn to people, you have pens and you have some writing, you're already doing some writing. So I'd like to just give you a first exercise right now. First exercise. So here's the question, everybody. Ready? We're going to try to make our transition as smoothly as possible. I know that I was competing with delicious wraps and salad and pecans. But as we clear the table, and you turn to somebody, actually, you can write this down, take a minute to write it down, or if you're not into writing down, I'm going to be asking you to share at your table in about a minute. Okay, just a minute of writing or thinking, and then opening to sharing. A minute of writing to yourself or thinking to yourself, and then sharing with those at your table. Here's the question. Ready, everybody? Okay, thank you. If someone met you in the grocery store and asked you what you love about your synagogue, what would you say? If they asked you, if you met someone in the grocery store and they said to you, what do you love about your synagogue, your shul, your temple, your Beit Knesset, what would you say? If they then ask you, what is it known for, what would you say? And if somebody, last part of this question, if somebody were to say, well, I'd like to get to know your synagogue, your temple, your community for the thing that it is known for, what would you then tell them to do? Go to the, attend the, listen to the, read the, yeah? So I hope that was clear. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit more time because I'm going to go over these questions again. 2 minutes to write or think about this answer. You will not be graded, but I will be asking people to share if they feel comfortable. But for 2 minutes now, either writing it or thinking again. If you ran into somebody in the grocery store or on the street or in the Starbucks, wherever it might be, they said, hey, you go to that great synagogue with Cantor Marina Shemesh. What's so hotsy-totsy about Temple Sinai and Summit? Why do you like it? What would you say? A, B? what are they known for? And C, what would you tell them to do if they were to express an interest in getting to know that temple for what it is known for? What would be the thing that you would give them as a direction? Ready, everybody? 2 minutes on the clock, and go. So if you're sitting next to someone and you guys are both finished, you don't have to wait for the whole table. Just turn to each other and start sharing. You might even be in the same temple and love it for different reasons.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah, and I'm an officer too. Like, I go to meetings yes. Now, there was something, you know, okay, so my first answer was that my friends are there. What do I like about why am I there? Why am I there? I think that what it's known for is
there is a little bit of, I guess, feeling of attention as well, but I think that
if someone was interested in learning more about it, I would tell them to attend one of the events or services or activities or something that makes them more interested in singing.
everybody wants. I mean, I think if you want people, like, park somewhere south to me, that's what it is.
Right.
Anybody want to share? Anybody want to share?
Sure.
Okay, everybody, hi, I know, it's so exciting, we're gonna be here for another couple of hours, and you guys all live in New Jersey, so hold on 1 second. We're gonna get a couple of people to share if they feel comfortable.
So, hi, I'm Henry Bloom from Congregation B'nai Israel in Milburn, and I guess for me, it's my synagogue is, I mean, it's where my community is. It's where I go to share things and you know, both good and bad. It's the place I want to be to do that, and where I'm welcomed and others are welcome to feel the same way. So that's kind of the overarching theme.
So if somebody meets you in a grocery store, they say, what do you love about B'nai Israel?
Yeah.
You say, it's the place where everybody knows my name. It's Cheers. Right. It's community, it's Kehillah, they know me. Okay, and then they say to you, what's the next question?
They say to me,
Well, what's it known for, this B'nai Israel, from your perspective?
so from my perspective, I think it's known as a warm and Hamish place where we welcome people and you know,
It's a warm and welcoming Hamish place.
yeah, right. Yep.
And then what do you tell them to do?
Come and experience it.
Come experience it. What's it?
Yeah. I think there are opportunities to come. Services or a community Shabbat dinner. There are ways that we,
Great.
there are opportunities.
Just come join us for something.
Yeah.
Okay, Henry. Anybody else want to share? Hi.
Yeah, I'm Mayor Tamika, Bloomfield, New Jersey. And one of the things I think, you know, someone came and asked me, what do I love? It's hard to put it in a very succinct way because I think we have so many things that I love. I love the fact that we're extremely progressive, that we have a lot of interfaith, biracial, same-sex couples, we're very ecumenical, and that makes me feel very comfortable that it is a very non-judgmental synagogue. It's a non-judgmental space. It's very accepting. I also think that we...
Near Tamid.
Temple Near Tamid in Bloomfield, yeah. We're also very involved in programming. We have so many interesting things. I think our rabbi has been an inspiration. The sermons always have people just so full. And I love the fact that we also have dialogue during every Shabbat. You know, it's like, this is the portion, and we open up discussion to the congregation. And I think that's educational, inspirational, and it just keeps your brain fresh, right? It's very involved. I think we're known for our porn spiels, truly known for our porn spiels.
Porn spiel.
Yeah. They're huge. We have like about 400 people who come. We rehearse for 5 months. We have a cast of 30. We write it. We produce it.
Did you guys all know this?
We have a band.
Near Tamid, everybody. The porn spiel. End all porn spiel.
It is. It's standing room only.
So is that where? How would I get some of that?
You've got to come to services.
Okay.
I say come to a Friday night service because they are in the chapel. They're small. They're intimate. They're Hamish. You want to come to that discussion, you come to services on Saturday and you open it up, you know, after any bar bat mitzvah, and that's open to all the community, you know. I mean, it's just we have artists in residence and scholars in residence, we have yoga programs, we have everything. I mean, it's really quite an expansive congregation.
Wonderful. Thank you.
How many of you, after Lisa's presentation, think that she should be giving the lecture?
I want some Near Tamid. I'm going Near Tamid in my life. Anybody here in the back? By the way, I want to remind you of the great Yitzhak Greenberg, Rabbi Yitzhak Greenberg's quip. His important quip. He said, I don't care what denomination you belong to as long as you're ashamed of it. And I want to say that also about, you know, in terms of equal opportunity, you know, you show me yours, I'll show you mine, you show me your community. Like, please don't be embarrassed if you didn't find anything about your community that you love, but then I wonder what you're doing here, but okay.
Hi, my name is Rabbi Deb Smith, and I am a Jewish Renewal Rabbi in New Jersey in Morris County. And I think if people stopped me on the street and asked the question that David posed, I think that the response would be creative, energetic spirituality, and that people come for that when they call, and they come for the deep ecumenism, the open work with the multi-faith community that we serve, and the social justice work that we do in that realm. And so that's been bringing people to us. We're 6 years old, and it's been bringing people to us since we became a community. And if people asked, what's this all about and how can I experience it, I would of course say, join us and try it. You've got to see it and experience it for yourselves.
It's called the name or?
It's called Congregation or Halev Jewish Renewal Community. It's in Sakasana.
Okay, wonderful. Anyone else? Thank you. Yeah.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Shalom. I'm from Shomrei Emunah. And the notes I had, and I shared with the table.
Mark.
Okay, yes, you hear me? The people at our synagogue are intelligent, insightful, and they try to integrate with tradition. What do I tell them? Come experience like everybody else. Our rabbi is Rabbi David Greenstein. He's informative, intellectually stimulating. He is learned and artistic. But I want to challenge the people here. We're all for our synagogue. The reason I came is because of the people who don't come to our synagogue. How do we get them involved? I know I don't know the answer, and that is the reason I came. And I think all of us are probably great PR for our synagogues, and that's great. And there's a commonality here, and that is come experience the warmth. And we have experienced it, obviously, because we keep going there. I've been there for almost 20 years. And one of the reasons is because I have kids and I want them to have a sense of tradition. The challenge is, how do you maintain tradition in an ever-changing world? And I don't know the answer, so that's why I'm going to give back the microphone to the guest lecturer.
Thank you, Mark. So, anyone else want to share before we move on? Something interesting also that just emerged, important just to make note of it. Mark's assumption, of course, is that this exercise is an exercise of those who have already bought in and are already a part of a core constituency of a community, and that we're kind of a self-selected group. So we already believe in it and we're already here. But in some fundamental way, we have to move from what keeps you there to what brought you there. So what brought you to your synagogues? Let's just do popcorn style. What brings people to a synagogue? You came for the preschool. Right? So you came for the religious school or preschool. When you were before preschool, you were not a member of a synagogue?
Actually, I'm part of a small group in my congregation. There were about 6 couples, I think, when we joined, that we were the only couples in the place who joined 3 kids. So we kind of formed a group, and then one by one, each of us had our kids. So, just learn to respect the community. But, my husband and I both grew up in synagogue households, and we knew as we were setting up and getting married that that's what we wanted, and we just went there.
And are the kids now out, or are the kids still in?
Yeah, both, one's graduating college, the other's still in college.
And what kept you in the synagogue?
The community, I'm B'nai One Morristown. The community, the diversity, the range that we've had in terms of the friends we've made, the activities that are available to us. And it's just, the people that were present have been here every time today.
It's a community. So it was kids and then it was community. So were it not for the community, you would have left.
I don't know. It's not something that we've ever looked at or thought about, because we thought it's not to happen.
Great. What's your name? Karen. Thanks, Karen. Anybody else? What brought you to Synagogue?
So for me, it was moved to the suburbs,
Yeah.
and 9/11 happened.
Mm.
And my partner is not Jewish, I am Jewish, and we went to the Unitarian Church, and we went to B'nai Keshet in Montclair, looking for help, looking for answers, looking for some connection to what's going on in the world, some
Right.
understanding.
Right.
And we stayed. We liked B'nai Keshet, decided to join, and have been there ever since.
So, I love the personal stories, but if we could just abstract them slightly. So you came seeking continuity for your children, trying to bring forward to them what you had as a personal experience. But it wasn't about you, but about your kids. And you stayed because the community held you. You grew. You came as a seeker. A traumatic moment in your life, some moment that destabilized you as a partner, and you went looking for a structure that would hold you spiritually and in meaning and give you a greater context. Right, so you came at a personal search, and you stayed. Okay, Susan.
So the reason I came, so I want to say I came because it was actually automatic. I grew up in an Orthodox household. So you belong to a synagogue, you do tzedakah, you do all of the things, and I happen to be now a member of a Reform congregation, where it is not an automatic response, at least in my community, for Jews to join the congregation. And that's a challenge in leading my congregation. But there's also the automatic response, which I think is dying out. I'm sorry to say, but I mean, for me, that's the way I was brought up. You always belong to a synagogue.
Right. So we're going to call this covenantal community. And even though it's not community per se, but it's the sense of being covenanted, and it's what you do. It is very similar to Karen's in the sense that Karen is trying to bring forward how she grew up to her children. But for you, it wasn't a choice as much as a given. But both of them are in some kind of some larger abstract sense. This is what Jews do. We belong to synagogues, and I'm trying to do what Jews do. And for you, Karen, you're trying to show your kids, and maybe on some level also assuming that you can't give your kids the kind of education, the kind of Jewish hands-on experiences that you yourself had that were formative for you. So you have to find the professionals in the community that will do that for you as well.
I wouldn't say that I can't do it, I could not have done it, but the bottom line, it takes a village to do it.
Takes a village. Okay. Who else? Someone else. Yeah, in the back. Someone who hasn't spoken yet, Mark. Thanks. Pamela Bain.
I came to my temple because I could walk there. I grew up, and I'm talking to two friends I just met here from the Good of Israel, and I went to this little shul on our high holy days. It was a little house. And we moved to Springfield, and I looked for a place to go, and I could walk, because it was around the block, and I could walk through. There was no Orthodox shul, and I wasn't going to walk 10 miles to be conservative. And I walked there with my hat on the high holy days, and you can, let me tell you, I stood out like a sore thumb. And I came late because I came the way I learned from my growing up. You came, you slept in with your children, you came in. And then I found my home.
Yeah.
I found a place where I changed from Ashkenazi Hebrew to Sephardic. I found a place where I could carry the Torah myself, not just watch other people do it.
Right.
And I found a place where I could be me.
Very good. So this is also a very beautiful story again. So very similar to Ivy, I think it is. I can't see it, but Ivy. This is part of the personal search, right? I came looking for a place that I could find that would be, it was convenient, it spoke to you, but it was also had to meet you, and it had to offer you tools for personal self-expression, and it had to be in the container of Jewish life, but it was something that was personally meaningful for you, and it kept you in that way. You could hold the Torah, right? Right. This is, right, these two models, you see how they have different iterations, but they, to some degree. Now, I'm going to take two more, and then I have to move on down. Stacy.
I don't know anybody else can say this. I went to my temple on my second date with my now husband. I don't think that's common.
There is that model of table for two near the V-Monk. I get it.
It was my in-laws' 35th wedding anniversary, and they had a special Shabbat. And it just worked out logistically.
Yeah.
And then my in-laws, who were then just the boyfriend's parents, were like, she's a ringer. So we're still there, and my 23-year-old son is the fourth generation member of the temple.
Wow.
So it was just a continuity thing. Again, no questions asked. It was like, if I was with him, I was there. There were no options.
Right. Beautiful story. You're right, it doesn't have a category, but we're going to introduce it. Yes, and I would take one more. Tanya from B'nai Or in Morristown.
So I joined when my kids were starting religious school, but I had never belonged to a temple. So it wasn't continuing anything that I had done as a child. Our family never belonged to a synagogue. So I had never been in a temple until B'nai Or. And my kids have since finished with their religious school. And I stayed because it provided opportunities of, I guess the best way is Jewish fellowship and learning. And as they've grown up, I've become more involved. But it wasn't anything that I knew was the thing to do because I wasn't raised that way.
So you discovered something that you didn't know, but it was a resource and it was a treasure that in some way was right there, but you had never been exposed to it. And once exposed to it, you didn't want to let it go again. And so you combined both of these searches, bringing a past that wasn't yours, but it was yours, into the future that you could shape. So as if you were to look on the sheets that I've given you, everybody, thank you for sharing, by the way, everybody. I'm going to assume that for some of you here tonight, you came for very practical, hands-on techniques and advice on maybe how to improve your synagogue. Maybe if you are temple near Talmid, you're here tonight because you never know. You have an amazing community, but you might learn something new. Who knows? For some of you here tonight, you might be in crisis or transition. There might be something that is, right, your membership is declining, or you're in a rabbi search. You don't know what the soul of the community is. You wish you kind of have no sheets on the table?
You're in the middle, yeah. In the middle of the table, there should be some text study.
There are no text on the table? Oh, okay. Sorry about that. We saw the temple near Talmid is so perfect they don't really need it. It's near Talmid, near Talmid. So Rabbi Sidney Schwartz, who's a teacher, a mentor, a friend, Rabbi Sidney Schwartz has written extensively on the synagogue and the new models that are emerging. He has a project called Kinisa about Jewish intentional community, and he tries to map out synagogues over the phenomena of the North American synagogue, and he essentially divides it into three periods. The early 1700s and the earliest expression of synagogue life in North America, he calls the immigrant synagogue. The synagogue was the place where the immigrant found sanctuary, a place where they belonged, a place where they, as a part of the immigrant marginalized communities or the minority communities, found sanctuary, brought the past to the present. Communities were essentially established, not because synagogue life, right? Synagogue life, as we understand it, is a relatively new phenomenon, even though synagogues have existed for 2,000 years. But synagogue life in North America essentially was the purpose of the synagogue was to establish an immigrant's presence and cachet. Houses of worship in North America in the 18th century were particularly expressive of the freedom of religion that America offered. And as such, it was a very profound statement of being a part of this new enterprise. Famous letters from presidents and other men of power to these communities, establishing them as safe sanctuary and protected places for those who were committed to practice their religious faith. Around the turn of the 20th century, Sid notices, of course, the establishment of what is called the ethnic synagogue. Synagogues that were fundamentally in the sense of an ethnic identity, not necessarily a religious one, but a civic and ethnic identity. that someone joins a synagogue or shtibos or these other community centers are created as expressions of an ethnic notion. Not necessarily religious, but as Jewish places, particularly Jewish. As an ethnic identity, it was no different in some sense than, let's say, a Protestant or a WASP, a white American, right? That there is an ethnic core that motivates the establishment of a center that is known as a synagogue, but it doesn't necessarily have religious or spiritual expression. This is what we do as Jews, just as the Protestants do what they do as Protestants. We have ethnic centers, deeply Jewish expressions, almost like synagogue as bagel and lox. Synagogue as an expression of Jewishness, but not necessarily as a sacred center. Sacred things happen there, but what's happening, right, is surface. What's really happening is, this is what Jews do. Jews go to the Lower East Side and they eat, certain foods. That's an expression of our Jewishness. Jews go to shtibels. That's what we do. Of course, that ethnic synagogue gives way as Jews move out of urban centers. It's deeply urban, that phenomenon. When they move out of urban centers, we begin to model ourselves after another phenomenon called the campus church. And we create synagogue sectors. Drop-off Judaism. Synagogue centers are places that, drawing from the burgeoning capitalist market model, offer Judaism as a fee-for-service phenomenon. We are the storefront that is the mall, right? Just as you have a lot of place to kind of open up a mall, so everybody's one-stop shop, you have a synagogue center that's a one-stop shul shop. People shul shop, even that language. They shop for shuls. They wonder, programs become the fundamental engine of membership. Programs. You have a demographic, let me make sure that there's a program for that demographic. Right? Kids get dropped off and then get picked up. Right? In other words, we are outsourcing to this synagogue center the Jewish identity, the Jewish programming, it's all inclusive. And the propositional value of that center, of course, is that it holds all of these things together, and that it is offering membership like a membership at a golf club. In other words, I am the CEO of a company called Temple Ner Tamid, or Temple Great Neck Synagogue, Temple Shalom, right? I am the CEO. The organizational hierarchy is structured in the same way because everything has to work according to the hierarchy, because the products have to be, there's an assembly line of products. We produce events. We produce a bar bat mitzvah, that's our #1 program. Here it is, right here. It has to be packaged well. It has to be packaged well, because if it's not attractive, people won't buy it. And people come to shop for a shul the way they would shop to see, to have their wedding in their space. And here, over here, is where the rabbi's quarters are. This is our rabbi. Oh, hi. And the synagogue center was a model of suburban Jewish life. It's a fundamental, and people who grew up with those centers, again, we don't assume that there was anything other than that. That it's motivated by certain, right, what motivates, what's a successful synagogue in a synagogue center? The bigger the better. Or the number of members. We don't ask for them, we don't take surveys on the quality of their experience. Have you felt intimacy in your synagogue center recently? They weren't structured that way. They weren't structured. Do you have a personal relationship with your rabbi? Or how many people have a personal relationship with their rabbi or the cantor? How accessible do you feel, right? But they weren't structured that way. We might have had it, right? But fundamentally, the architecture of the structure, too, was built to create reverence and built to create a certain, right? It's not cathedral-esque, but certain inaccessibility, a serious man.
Yeah.
And that model, for a million reasons, has eroded, has lost its luster. It's no longer relevant. It isn't a model that it's not a relevant model for today. For a whole host of reasons. Can anybody try to imagine a couple of the reasons? Chaim Herring has 6 of them, but we might want to look at our own. First of all, people are moving out. Right? And back in the urban center. A, B. Yes.
Well, I think that if you look at it as fee for service, and you don't come to services, or you don't use what it has, then you have not invested anything in that. You have not made that your community. You have not invested in that. And so therefore, you don't see the merit in shelling out whatever the dues are, because you're not using it. You're not looking at it as you are supporting a community that's expansive and extensive.
So that's one reason people don't buy in, and so it's hard to get people to buy in. But again, that's a problem with any business, which is, since we haven't yet tried out the product, we have to spend X amount of money on customer acquisition. How are we going to acquire a customer? We have to have a marketing department, we have to have a promotional department, all those kinds of things. And people do that because when they're in that model, and people who still work within that model, and by the way, there are plenty of certain shuls and communities and churches that work within that model, the answer that they will give is the reason why people are not, again, even hear it here. What do you tell your folks that you meet and say, this is a great thing? You say, come try out the product. If only you tasted how good this cheesesteak is, it would be so amazing. How do I get you to take, maybe if I place it near the cash register. So there is that model, right? And so, to some degree, that would mean, right, buying marketing space and advertising space, on the street corners. Being evangelical to get people in the door. It would mean maybe having a TV. I mean, there are good reasons to hold on to that model, but in the 60s and in the counterculture, it began to erode. And the principal reason that we could go around the room, but I'm going to run out of time. The principal, maybe the most essential reason for this model's demise, or it hasn't fully, but it began to, the underpinnings, is because it felt disingenuous to the very mission of a synagogue. To enter into a relationship with a sacred, an institution whose assumption is sacred services, not commodities. If you are a seeker who grew up with a yearning for meaning, purpose, God, the whole shebang, the whole enchilada, the big burrito, if you had a God yearning that meant something like being inspired, uplifted, connected with, and you grew up going to that synagogue, at that time, the counterculture began to tease it apart and say, really? That's where you're going to look for meaning and purpose? I'm sorry, that's not the place to find it. We see the birth of the Chavurah movement. We see the birth of intimate circles that say we don't trust authority figures who are standing up on high giving us sermons from their pulpits. We're going to start grassroots, right? Chavurah. Participant-led. Shlomo Carlebach services where people happy clappy. The demise of the Chazan and the power of the Chazan and of the rabbi's sermons, which are not participatory and dialogical but monological. So there are factors that are much bigger than the synagogue that are beginning to erode the structure of that synagogue model. And what Sid posits, Rabbi Sid Schwartz posits, is that we're actually in now a fourth stage of synagogues in North America called community synagogues that focus on, and that was the refrain over and over again here, is Kehillah. Kehillah Kedoshah, sacred community. Now, in order to differentiate this community from other communities, because when I went around the room, and even though Mark notwithstanding, we want to get to some strategies, and we want to get to some tactics, and we're going to get to those things, one of the things that is salient, that if you're trying to sell a synagogue to someone, let's say, and say, how do we get those people over there, whatever they are, those people, the ones who haven't yet realized how great this is. We tell them, well, why do you go? Because the people are great. And what do you say when you say, well, I get that at the gym at SoulCycle. Or I don't really need that great community because you know what? I go to a great restaurant on the Upper West Side every Thursday night. There's a rabbi who's in the who waits on me, brings me my favorite alafongi, and it's delicious. Where's the Kedoshah of the Kehillah? In the model where the sacred has been denuded to some degree, in a synagogue, and you come to someone and say, it's really a great place, there's such great people, come to the Kiddush, it's amazing. Or you know what, don't come to the Kiddush, come to yoga, and eventually if you come to yoga, we're going to get you in for Kol Nidre. That's one model too, right? We get them in the basement, and then we hope that from the basement they're going to work their way into the main sanctuary, which is part of the Cineplex model too. And it has its merits too. And Chaim Herring, whose quotes we're going to read in a moment, he was the one who created the Star Cineplex complex, Cineplex model. But more often than not, people who come in to the basement, hoping they're going to come up with the main sanctuary, actually just make something, like David Volpe wrote this, it just makes us find more space in the basement. And so, the model that Sid Schwartz has been arguing for, which is sacred community, which the creators of Synagogue 2000, Lawrence Hoffman and Dr. Ron Wolfson, whose work is so fundamental, is that we need to put God back at the center of our synagogues. And that the one thing that will bring people back to synagogues or into synagogues, which has been tried not so much, is the sense of the sacred mission of the synagogue. And you can call it what you want. If you're a Kaplanian, you can call it the force that makes for salvation. If you're a conservative Jew, you can call it God. If you're a renewal Jew, you can call it God as Shekhinah, whatever you want to call it. But people are looking for meaning, purpose, and that will never go out of style. And that synagogues that place an emphasis on mission, and the mission as a sacred center to lift up and connect people to the sacred dimension of their lives Jewishly, are more likely to attract people with a raison and with a mission that distinguishes it from, let's say, a really great soul cycle class. Because you get, and trust me, people have great people in their other dimensions of their life. So why would I pay good money to come and hear a really boring service just because the people are great? The services are really meaningful. That's unique. So let's talk about this for a second, okay? So open up, if you can open up the sheet. Source number 5 on page 4. Source number 5 on page 4. Yeah, everybody there? Because we're going to move fast now. Great. Chaim Herring wrote a book called Tomorrow's Synagogue Today. Tomorrow's Synagogue Today. He maps 6 trends that shape current synagogue models. He writes, there are 6 societal trends that have reshaped many professions, and here are the 6 trends. From the age of organizations toward the age of networks. From credentialed professionals toward avocational experts, or DIY, do it yourself. From hierarchical control toward individual autonomy. From exclusivity toward inclusivity. From monopolization of knowledge toward democratization of knowledge. And from assuming a fee-for-service economy toward expecting a free-for-service economy. This last one is fundamental. If you're working with millennials who have been taken on a free trip to Israel, gratis, and then you start talking to them about what it is to pay for a synagogue membership, or that they even have to pay for a synagogue membership, that's really big news to them. Or in an Uber culture, where I can just have an Uber come and pick me up anywhere and I don't need a centralized taxi, right, service. In other words, anyone with a car can come and pick me up. We are living in the age of Uber rabbinical services. I'm your private rabbi. I can't tell you how many people come and say, listen, I'm not going to join the synagogue, but I'm going to do a bar mitzvah on a dock somewhere. Will you come and, I'm not going to get married in the synagogue. I don't want to join it, but can you give my kid a bar mitzvah in 6 weeks? And of course, we have our hands tied, because if you say no, they say, okay, great, I'm just going to go get a private rabbi. And I'm going to do it on a mountain somewhere with the mountain rabbi. Right? Or if you say, you know what, I'm going to leave it up to the professionals to give the sermons every Shabbat.
And you have somebody in the community who knows that every single piece of Jewish knowledge and information, which used to be dependent upon being able to read Aramaic or Hebrew, or understand Onkelos and Rashi and the Ramban and the Rambam and all of them, and all of a sudden you're online and everything is written in English, and it's also, you can listen to an MP3. So what happens to rabbis and their sense of authority over knowledge? It's either a challenge or it could be a wonderful opportunity to invest people in giving their own sermons. And so how we work with this moment, whether it's buildings and the structures of buildings, or membership and the challenge of membership, or authority and hierarchy, and all of these pieces are fundamental to how we can revitalize this again. Because what is true is this: we are always, as humans, seeking the sacred. I begin with that assumption. It will look different for you or for me. You might be an atheist who is drawn to meaning and purpose by fighting with the ugliness of mythic religion that distorts. But you want to be doing that Jewishly. It could be that you're in love with a young woman who's not Jewish. But you had the deep respect and desire to have that love expressed Jewishly, and you come to me or someone else and say, will you Jewishly affirm that I'm committing my life and will build a family with this other human being? And will you use Jewish technologies and tools and frames to lift it up and give it sacred quality? And I know that if I say no, I lose someone. It's a pivotal moment now that we're in. And not everyone will answer it the same way, but we have an important possibility. So I'm going to read this last piece from Lawrence Hoffman, and then I want to get into the brass tacks of spending the next 45 minutes, half hour, 45 minutes, with all of you on what Romumu has done and what Romumu, I think, has learned from others, and what we haven't done well. And I had wanted to teach a really beautiful story that's on the back of the sheet, but we're not going to get to it. This is one of my favorite quotes from Larry Hoffman, okay? Here it is. It's not about programs, we announce incessantly. It's about doing synagogue differently. Thinking differently is what distinguishes transformational from mere additive change. The kind of change that synagogues generally thrive on. Synagogues operate as default institutions doing business according to the presupposed and unquestioned theories of operation. They provide programmatic offerings, worship services, life cycle ceremonies, hospital visits, supplementary religious school, adult education. Like as new congregate needs are intuited, synagogues just add to the offerings a tot Shabbat, outreach to the intermarried, alternative, minyanim, and so forth. The synagogue changes readily, therefore, but only by adding new programs to the old ones. At stake, of course, is an underlying market model of synagogue existence, accompanied by a corporate model of synagogue structure. Programs are the return for dues, congregant shul shop, and so on. A division of labor sometimes reaches the point where the board meets for business but does not attend services. Anybody have that in their synagogue? Okay, I'll show you mine. Me too! At Roman, we have people who never show up for synagogue. Why are they on the board? Are we on video? Do I have to say anything else after that? Do we really have a choice not to have them on the board? Not really? Maybe? So he says, as I said, I will return to this later on. Transformative change starts with helping congregations surface the implicit thinking. Surfacing implicit thinking. Change is hard. No one wants to change, not because we don't want to change, we change all the time, but because we're afraid of losing what we are changing from. I was a yeshiva student in a place called Beit Torah, second year, and I was invited to give a Dvar Torah, a mini sermon, a little word, at a shul on the Upper West Side called Ramat Ora on a Friday night. It was the Shabbat of the Mishkan. It was Parshat Truma. We were reading about the portable structure in the desert. And as I sat there singing, about to sing the Chadodi, the most beautiful and eloquent and most mystical and romantic of all Jewish liturgy, I was raptured. I was like, oh, I can't believe I made it back. I used to be a Pilates instructor. Now I'm like sitting around with all these people about to give a bar talk to a couple hundred people. It's all beautiful. All I could think about were the two young men sitting in front of me who were bickering because the cantor was not singing the melody that they were hoping he was going to sing. And so I prepared like a 2-page, 6-minute, snappy little bar talk, and I said, I left it on my seat, and I said, I stood up in front of the pulpit and said, here, let me tell you what the Mishkan means to me. The Mishkan means to me that God wants me to be flexible with my service. And God wants me to be able to pack up what I thought was working yesterday so that I can find out what needs to work today and tomorrow. But if I bring all of my ideas in, and I think, right, that that's what God wants, then I'm going to miss it. Right? And would God, if I could imagine a divine being who would want my prayers, and I do, as theologically traditional as that is, I do imagine that. I can't imagine that same being would be thrilled to know that as I was beginning to offer these beautiful words, I was bickering with my friend because the poor schleb who decided to sing instead of, Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, some crazy... And these minhagim, these customs, are at the core. So instead of thinking in dividing synagogue into two different ways, this is the way Chaim Herring and Larry Shepard and Larry Hoffman. Instead of thinking it's the people, not the product, or it's the product, not the people. Because in the model, it's the people, not the product. It's we have this great thing, how do we get them in the door? It's the people's fault. We have a great product, we just have to figure out how to get them here. That's one model, right? He calls that model the neo-Orthodox, kind of rooted in Germany. So that's the German neo or modern Orthodox model. So it's the people, not the product. Really what we have is a tremendously powerful tool. Let's just figure out how to bring people in. That's true enough on its own terms. And often the second camp, which he claims is reform, which was the product was broken. We got to upgrade the software. And Heinrich says they're both true. But they're insufficient because we have to ask assumptions about what's the point of synagogue life to begin with. Why have a synagogue at all? What's the mission of the synagogue? And he goes through a beautiful exercise. What would be, if you would start from scratch, what would be the purpose of a synagogue? What would be the purpose of your synagogue, Stacy?
To make Jews.
To make Jews. To be a juicer. A juicer. Right? Fresh squeezed juice. It's such a funny thing. There's a Chabad story that I heard, I don't remember, a long time ago, where the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, right, the founder of the Chabad movement, his name is Shneur Zalman of the Adi. And Shneur Zalman of the Adi was known to be a great mystic, and he was a brilliant, intellectually fiery and complex individual. And he had, in the town that he lived in the Adi, he had shiurim, he had a class in 3 different levels. There was kind of beginner, intermediate, and super advanced. And one day, one of the students who'd been studying with him for a long time made it into the advanced class, and he went up and studied with him in the attic, and it was unbelievable. And he came outside after hearing what he had been hoping to hear for years, and he was screaming, I'm on fire, I'm on fire, I'm on fire. The Rebbe, it's so beautiful, so beautiful. And then he asked for something strange. He said, would someone tie me up to a tree? So he was a little bit, destabilized, and so he said, okay, a little bit sugar nuts. So they said, okay, fine. So they kind of tied up to a tree. They said, can you tell us why? I said, when you go into a town, right, and you want to know where you can get great shoes, you look for someone who's in the window, they put their shoes in the window, there's a great sandler, there's a great shoemaker. You go somewhere else, a good tailor. I wanted to be the window dressings for the Rebbe because he makes good shoes. So shul is like a retail outlet for making good shoes. Okay, make good shoes. That's my mission statement, make a good Jew. What does that mean? Make a good Jew? Or make a Jew?
To be educated in tradition and have that impact your life. So when you're educating these kids and they're going off to these colleges with all this stuff, they have...
So the synagogue as a place that keeps you the antibodies to fight against assimilation. Got it.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, yes.
I think the synagogue should be a place where Jews can connect with Judaism in whatever way they can.
So a place where Jews can connect to Judaism, it's circular, but a place where Jews can connect to Judaism in a way that's most meaningful to them. Okay. Okay.
Torah. We were all at Mount Sinai.
Okay.
The Torah. The Torah and the davening is something that...
Torah and the davening. Torah and davening. Okay.
Yes, it is. Well, the davening is because the Beis HaMikdash doesn't exist, and we have been trying since the Beis HaMikdash vanished to recreate that which was.
Okay, so there's a Mikdash Ma'at quality called the M&M factor. So it's kind of Mikdash Ma'at. We were once in a holy temple in Jerusalem somewhere, in some mythic past or some real past. We know that there was really a temple there. So the temple that we now have is these little temples that we have. And so it recreates that. It's prayer, it's Mount Sinai, it's a little bit of both. It's got all that going on. Great, okay, that's a mission statement, I think. Okay.
I like the word searchers.
A place for seekers. For searchers, people who are on a search. So building it from there. Okay. Anybody else? Lenore.
On the same lines, for me, it would be a place where you could try to make meaning out of chaos. Whether it's personal chaos or societal chaos, but someplace you could go where you could be a seeker to work that out.
So a place to work
For a
out.
long time.
So can you imagine the difference between the different synagogues that we have here? And there doesn't have to be one synagogue, but one is a healing center, right? Judaism as a healing, as refuah for the makkah of being a human being. It's a place where you go to reconnect. From the original root of the word religion is to ligare, ligament, to reconnect, to ligament ourselves, to reconnect ourselves. Okay, and then you have another model which is more traditional. It's a place to educate yourself on Torah and to learn. We have one here which is focus. The energy of the synagogue should be about giving people the tools that they will need when they go out into the world, so that they don't lose their Jewishness. Okay, and then
a place to instill Jewishness in the children.
A place to instill Jewishness in children.
Also, for me, it's a place where you can take that which is traditional Judaism and find a way to make it current, to make it work with the world today.
So that is, again, in the similar model. So we have a similar model, but there it's, of course, the purpose is to make it relevant and take traditional. It's so interesting how no one said the word God in the last 5 minutes. Just saying, I'm just noticing. I'm not saying that you have to have God in there. I don't know that she cares, either way. But I want to talk about what we, and what I came here to offer, which is, there are many different ways, and there isn't, right? I think that there was a fear that if you're coming from an urban center and you come out to the suburbs, what are you going to tell us? Because everything that you do in New York stays in New York, and what are you going to do with that in New Jersey? What do you do with that in Middle America? What do you do, right? Which is, of course, what they said about BJ back in the day, B'nai Jeshurun in New York. And, of course, lo and behold, someone like Rabbi David Wolfe started Friday Night Live, and thousands of people came. But, of course, he's in LA, so maybe it's only on the coastline. But one of the principles of Synagogue 2000 that I was a part of, and one of the principles that I think all of you need to think about is that what we're looking for is application, not replication. That if we understand the presumptions and the assumptions that go into what models that we have in our synagogue, is it a fee for service? Is it not a fee for service? Is it built upon a model of synagogue life that centers around programming, or is it a model of synagogue life that centers around people? Is it a model of synagogue life that centers around an orienting principle toward the entirety of the institution, or is it kind of a quasi, like, is the synagogue just a place where we're living out a denominational agenda? Those are all important things to bring to awareness. And then we look at, best practices and other kinds of things that have been brought and tools, and we ask ourselves, not can I replicate what is going on at Roman or at BJ or at Ikar or at Kavanah or at Temple Nir Tamid or at Keshet, but what is the principle that animates that moment? And can I apply that principle Not its form, but the principle. I'll give you an example. So when people ask me what a synagogue should be, I say, I think it's very simple. A synagogue is not about Jewish identity. It's not about Jewish learning. It's not about making sure that people, my kids, when they go off to good colleges, are not tempted and lose their Jewish core. My mission statement for Romamu is build an institution where every person that leaves a program, an event, a worship service, a learning feels more alive than when they came in. Not more Jewish. That would be great. If they feel more Jewish, great. I happen to have a lot of non-Jews who come. I don't program for them to feel more Jewish. I don't program for myself to feel more Jewish after I finish learning Kabbalah or Hasidus. I want people to feel more alive. Because I think people come back to things that animate their lives and make them feel more alive. And I could be wrong. But based upon that, I'll think if you can hold questions for a second. I want to move into 3 moments and a lot of little suggestions. The spirituality of welcoming and inclusion means that we adopt a posture of being a welcoming community as creating a welcoming ambiance, creating a welcoming worship service, and a welcoming membership structure. And we put welcoming at the center because it makes people feel more alive, more honored as human beings. And that we value welcoming not because of customer acquisition and customer retention. Somebody wrote that, like, is he going to talk about membership retention? Not because they are commodities, but because we, as an institution, want to walk out everything that we teach and everything we pray as if we really mean it. As if we really mean it. So when I was about to become a rabbi, my uncle Joel Shalom, who passed away this past Sukkot, someone I love very dearly, who had his own tortured relationship with he belonged to every synagogue in New York, and went to none of them. And because it was like porridge for him. Like it was like he would go to an Orthodox shul, go to Rabbi Weiss's shul, otherwise shul, and be like, I love it, but I can't sit with my wife. I can't sit with my wife. And then he would leave, and he would go to DJ. He was like, I love it, but the politics or something, bothered him. It was a constant sense of this shul's just not right. It was. Anybody know anybody like that? But before I became a rabbi, he said to me, listen, David, I love you. You've been on a long journey. But here's the thing: the only thing you need to remember is this joke. That once a woman came to the rabbi of the community and said, Rabbi, my son, I don't know what to do with him. He's at home and I'm beside myself. She said, well, Mrs. Goldman, what's the problem? She said, Rabbi, my son is home and he's sitting and learning Torah all day. She said, what's the problem with that? You don't understand. He's learning Torah. He's also praying all day. And she said, Mrs. Goldberg, I'm the rabbi of your shul. That's what I do. I mean, it's good. Trust me, it's good. She said, no, Rabbi, you don't understand. He means it. It's harsh, right? It's harsh. Harsh. And so I looked at my Uncle Joe and I said, what are you telling me? He said, make sure whatever you do, you mean it. And then in his own inimitable style, he said, and if you can fake that, you got it made. So I tell young rabbis, you have to mean what you're doing, and then if you can fake it, you got it made. So if we put welcoming at the center of the communal life, welcoming, it means that we don't say words like Hamish unless we can assume, and we shouldn't, that somebody actually knows what that word means. The Hamish communities are great. It's Hamish. I didn't know Hamish. Welcoming communities means that we put ourselves in the perspective of somebody who has never been to synagogue, and we build the synagogues around that principle. What would it look like to build a synagogue for those who don't go to synagogue? I grew up in a shul where you walked in, And nobody said hello to you except the guy who was at the door, who was Oswaldo, who was the guy who put out all of the Talitos. And so Dr. Ron Wolfson, has a thing called Wolfsoning. It means that whenever he teaches a class, he's at the door. Anybody here get a hello from me when you walked in here? Every single, in a welcoming ambiance means that every single thing that we do as a synagogue is to say to somebody, we are so happy that you're here. And we know what it's like to walk in to a new place. A place where you have never been before, maybe you don't know anyone. A place where you don't read Hebrew potentially, you're not even Jewish, maybe you are a Christian, maybe you are a Sikh, maybe you are an atheist, agnostic, but from the moment we walk in, the entire community turns towards you because that is our value, because we are, right, we are B'nai Avraham, B'sar Yameinu, Machlisei Orchim. We don't just read the story of the angels in Parshat Vayera, chapter 18 of the book of Genesis, but we seek to live that. So that I am willing to sacrifice the Kiddush quality that comes from being in a shul and that familiarity that I'm so happy. That's why I stayed, is because everybody here knows my name, and I want to go to a place where everyone knows my name. But if you want people to move from the periphery to the center, which is always what it's about in synagogue life and church life, to move from the outermost ring of disengagement to those who are engaged deeply and part of your core, we have to be willing to be part of a welcoming community. So one of the things that we did at Roman was every Friday night, in the middle of services, it doesn't matter, we get 500-600 people every Friday night. It doesn't matter how, and we, at least 10% of those people have never been to Rome before, at least 10%, if not more. We stop between Kabbalat Shabbat and Baruch Hu, and we take 15 minutes, and I ask people who are there for the first time to please stand up and say hello. And we do it on Shabbat morning. When we get, let's say, half of that on Shabbat morning, we have people turn to each other and say hello. You can go to a synagogue your whole life and nobody ever says hello to you. Now, I know this is not your problem, but in a welcoming ambiance, it's not just that. I'm going to give you some more welcoming ambiance tips. In a welcoming ambiance, right, in a community that is welcoming, you can ask yourself very clearly, are we a welcoming community? Can a movement be a welcoming community when its sidurim are not transliterated? I'm asking you that. If your assumption is, and I'm just going to say, and I've said this at JPS, so I don't mind saying it here, certainly, and I don't mean to offend anybody who belongs to the conservative movement, but I find it, and we're going to get to this in a welcoming worship service, I find it really hard to believe that somebody who would come in to a synagogue to pray to God, but is barred from that because of they want to chant, but we've made an institutional decision not to have transliteration. And so I know communities that use the Sim Shalom, which is beautiful, Siddur, Lev Shalom, it's all beautiful, who actually have a transliteration book that give them out at the door. I'll give you some more things. Welcoming ambiance. Make sure that the name and the address of the congregation is clearly visible from the street, no matter which direction it's coming from. Include a sign of greeting on the marquee or banner saying, "Welcome to Sinai Temple," or "Rome welcomes you, Bruchim Abayim, B'Shem Adonai," we welcome you in the name of God. Put a banner in front of your synagogue that says, "Everyone is a child of God and is welcome in God's home." I don't know, I don't have like parking spaces, but you guys do probably. So keep visitor parking spaces reserved in the front of the lot. Make sure they know where the entrance to the building is. This is telling you that we are welcoming you. There should be a directory of offices and a clear mapping of the building so that people don't get lost when they come to your building. Put informational brochures about synagogue programs on a bulletin board. I'm sure all of you have all of these things. Make sure offices are clearly marked, and that maybe you even have a photograph of the people who work in the space so people can get to know the faces of the people who work in the synagogue. Have nursing rooms that offer privacy for mothers who are feeding. Provide a welcome booklet in each pew with a brief history of your congregation, a description of the sanctuary, an outline of the prayer service, and an invitation to consider membership. Hand out chocolate Shabbat kisses at the end of the services. Now let me tell you something. Maybe none of those ideas spoke to you. Maybe they were like, oh, that's too kitschy, it's too touchy-feely, we're not going to do that. That's not our style. But here's what I don't believe. I don't believe that we can't reorient our synagogues to take into consideration what it would be like to bring people in for the first time and welcome them. And be even more creative about it. And to enlist the entire community to be greeters. I did a survey with my team about greeting around the liberal Jewish world, like who greets? So, how many people here have board members that greet on Shabbat? How many people don't have anybody designated to greet, you just kind of whoever's there greets? So this is important, right? It's an important thing. I remember when I worked in a restaurant, I talked about in the beginning of tonight about working in a restaurant. Anybody here know what a spotter is? A spotter is somebody who's undercover who works for the restaurant to come in to see the service that you're offering. They walk in, you don't know that they're a spotter, it could be anybody, and they walk in, and they literally take notes on everything from the first time someone said hello to them, the first time they were offered water, the first time they were asked for a drink. If we did that study in synagogues around the country, the first time somebody said hello to you, was it within the first minute of walking in the door? The first 5 minutes? How many years did it take for someone to offer you to come to their house for a Shabbat meal? So we spend inordinate amounts of money in our synagogues on all kinds of things. And the number one important member acquisition piece is making a connection with somebody once they've made it in the door. Not to mention, of course, and here's an important piece. If you look at Rick Warren, who the creator of Saddleback Church, one of the biggest megachurches in the country, he has 5 C's that are the concentric circles of community. The 5 C's. The 5 C's basically the 5 C's are in moving from the outside periphery to the inside. The largest circle is called the crowd, the community rather, the community of unengaged. Yeah. The second circle is the crowd. The third circle, I'm trying to find it here, I come back to it. I'll find it.
Yeah, it's like a show.
I'm sorry, so this community, this is the pool of the unaffiliated, under-affiliated, or once-affiliated people. The crowd is everyone who shows up for a service and a program. What Stephen Cohen calls the engaged but unaffiliated. The people who belong to the synagogue, the official membership is called the congregation. The committed are those people for whom Judaism is a serious business. They're the people who are dedicated to growing. They attend services at least once a month. They study and maybe even volunteer. And then there are the core, the most devoted members of a congregation. They're the leadership people who right? The congregation is the center of their lives. They learn Torah, they read Torah, they're there every Shabbos. They're the ones who are the core. Now, the model, of course, is to bring people from the community to the crowd, and from the crowd to the... So that's the work. And in Saddleback Church, it takes them 4 years. They invest 4 years. 4 years to move people from the periphery, from the community, all the way to the core. Yes?
What do you do if your core is exclusive? Just a thought. just something some of us may have seen at some point.
So I want to come back to that when I talk about membership, but I want to move from welcoming ambiance to welcoming worship. So welcoming worship is, in Roman in our community, it's basically 3 M's: meditation, music, and message. Every great service has to have those 3 M's, and the music has to be participatory. And the point of the music is not to finish the davening, but to have a spiritual experience. Meaning you are different. Something about you is different, and to that end, we don't care if people read along or don't read along. We don't care if they finish the words that are in the Siddur. Nobody comes to Romamu out of a sense of obligation, that they have to be yotze. They have to fulfill their obligation. I guarantee you, I'm telling you, I know this because I know my people, 1,000 people there. I know them. Nobody's coming because they have a chiyuv, they have an obligation to daven on Friday night. And so, you know, if you skip this part of the Siddur on Friday night, then I wasn't yotze. We don't have that. Now, there could be synagogues like that, and I think that renewal happens there too. But my fundamental assertion is that the point of the prayer experience is to experience transcendence. And in order for that to happen, the music has to be powerful. For the first 2 years of Ramamu, from 2006 to 2008, 2009, I didn't take a salary. All the money that came in for the rabbi's salary, I put into the music program. And I waited tables. I put as much money that came in that didn't go towards overhead into music. Right into music. And not music where people would be sitting going, oh wow, this is just like going to the Philharmonic. Although that's also beautiful. But music where people would be able to breathe together and sing together, and that the state change in the person would be tangible. And I made sure that as often as possible I said things like God, or whatever you believe in, the mystery, and I would name it 3 or 4 times. God, Goddess, mystery, nothing. So that I knew that everyone in the room knew that I wasn't saying that you had to believe in my God to be here. And in fact, I was saying that probably the God that you believe in and the God that your neighbor believes in are not the same God. And we also offered time for people to breathe. Because the services were not a place where people had to finish everything on their davening or prayer plate, but they had to be able to pause long enough to taste what they just eaten. And so between great music, meditation that literally was silence, there was a message. And the message had to be short, sweet, and applicable Torah. Now, it could be all of you have this, but I'm just telling you that I didn't learn how to do applicable Torah in yeshiva. For me, if I showed you an insight based upon the numerology of God's name being 26, and the Yud is this shape and that shape, but to really teach people Torah in a way that they can then say, well, what is the good advice that this Torah is teaching me in my life? Now go do it. Applied Torah is very different than interesting Torah. And I made it very explicit in Romamu, and I still say it in renewal around the country. We don't go into an academic lesson and start singing a song, and you should not bring your academic sermon into a synagogue space. There are going to be people who are going to be like, that really engaged my mind. My mind is on fire. And they're going to be the only 3 people left in the synagogue when it closes. Because people don't come to the synagogue for an interesting idea. They can read it on the, at home, lying in. They want to be inspired. This is what Abraham Dr. Herschel said. Rabbis, preach for prayer. Preach to pray. When you preach a sermon, you are opening people's hearts to then pray that sermon. To the God that they choose, the God of love, the God of this, the God of that, the ground of being, whatever you call it. But don't preach to be interesting, or to be cute, or to bring Wissenschaft. That's not the purpose of your pulpit. So again, agree or don't agree, but that's my experience as a rabbi in Rome, and what some of the studies are showing is that rabbis in welcoming services are using the pulpit to inspire and to give people a sense of, wow, I didn't know Torah could be so relevant. I didn't know that Judaism could speak to my condition in such a powerful way. And welcoming worship also means that we use English songs and that we sometimes pray in English because it's the lingua franca. And the Reform movement knows this so beautifully, and we didn't learn it in you know, I grew up thinking it was too Goyish, but I love, if anybody's ever been to Agape Church or any of these great, I've been to so many mega churches, and I cry the whole time. They're singing, God use me, let me be your tool, you know, let me be the one, use my hands. And I'm thinking, wow, use my hands. Of course it's music, oh, it's in the Jewish, I know it's in the Jewish tradition, I can quote from the Midrash too. Not only but I'm saying it in language I would say to my wife, you know, I love you so much, to my little baby, 3 babies. I'd speak it, so why don't we use English more? Not doing away with the liturgy, God forbid. The liturgy is a repository, it's gorgeous, it's stunning. But more English, making worship more welcoming. Inviting people to say their names, inviting people to connect to one another, inviting to use the Siddur in more profound ways. Welcoming worship also means that we make it accessible to those who have disabilities and so on, all of those things. And what's the most profound way you can make services welcoming? Anybody know? You guys all knew, right? Say it out loud. Say it proud. Make it short. It's so crazy. It's so crazy. I grew up where we began davening on Shabbos morning at 9 and it was done at 12:30. So what did that invite me to do? Sleep. I would come in at I'd come right around the beginning of the Torah service and be like, Pop. You'd be like that. You made an invite, even saw our own. Unbelievable. Make our services shorter. Make our services shorter. Making our services shorter means that, you know, again, we're talking about drastic measures here. And again, I'm hoping not to step on anybody's toes, and if anybody here runs a movement, or, you know, but for goodness sakes, there are parts of the Siddur that it has become a museum where any beautiful liturgical piece got schlepped in. We do 2 Yikum Porkans in a traditional service. 2 of these Aramaic prayers, nobody even knows what they're saying half the time. And it creates an atmosphere that is the opposite of sacred center. A welcoming worship service would also look like this, that we are invited to move and not sit and passively imbibe. Inviting people, like there was a great rabbi, Rabbi Larry Kushner, Lawrence Kushner. He was known at Beth El in Massachusetts for being the rabbi without the chairs. They had a chairless sanctuary. There was no place to sit. The services were shorter. When people felt that they couldn't stand anymore, you know what they did? They sat on the floor, or they started dancing. They started moving. Because standing in one place is hard, but when you start moving, welcoming worship service would mean that when you have 10 to 50 people who are saying Kaddish, and this is probably obvious to everybody here, but I'm going over things that I think are best practice, and it might be, again, not theory, but practice, and take the application, not the replication of this. Adapt it, don't adopt it. When someone stands up to say Kaddish, and you ask them to say the name of the person that they are saying Kaddish for. Now, on one level, it's going to lengthen your service by a couple of minutes. But really? For all of you here, it's so obvious, but look at the theory here. Look at the application of it. It's better to make a service more human and more vulnerable than it is to hold by some assumption about what Kaddish is. For most people who say Kaddish, they wait the whole week. In most liberal synagogues, they don't pray every day. There's no daily minyan in most liberal synagogues. Even if they have a minyan, not everyone's going. Most people come on Shabbat. That means they wait the whole week to memorialize their mother, father, brother, sister, aunt, uncle. And so they're standing there, and they have literally, it's going to take 1 minute. I have a friend in New York City who grew up with me as an Orthodox kid, And every year on the north side of her mother, she goes to a well-known Orthodox synagogue on the west side. And she goes for the Yortzeit. It's once a year, and it's Maariv, so it's short. It's short. And in Orthodox synagogue, it's when you're doing the mumbo jumbo, chaotic davening, it's like they're done in 5 minutes and goodbye. And I said to her, I said, Jennifer, you know, how many people were saying Kaddish tonight? She said, 3. 2 of us, my sister and I, and a guy on the other side. And I said, did he ask you to say Sally's name? She said, no. And I went, Rabbi's a friend of mine. I said, come on. It's a moment. Opening up the ark and inviting people to pray from their hearts in the ark. Inviting people in the middle of worship to spontaneously say, you ask them a question, you say, anybody here, you know, thinking about your grandkid? I mean, we can do this with prayer leaders. How to get prayer leaders to invite people to be off book. Because you think that prayer happens in the book. And the book is not the meal. The book is just a recipe book. It's like, oh, here's a recipe for gratitude. It goes like this. But that's just a recipe. It's only trying to cook up gratitude for you. So maybe modani doesn't work for you. Maybe you just say, thank you. Thank you. Maybe you don't say the full sentence, you just say modani for 5 minutes. So welcoming worship means that we're willing to ask assumptions about the technologies and ask where they're pointing towards and maybe find a better way to get to what they're pointing at. How many people have ever had people in their community hold hands during a prayer service? How many people think that would completely destroy any semblance of respectability that your community would have if there was hand holding? Kumbaya, right? It's kumbaya, what's the kumbaya? How many people, just because we're coming in for a land, we're going to do welcoming membership and then questions and I'll drive all the way back to the end. How many people here take seriously the notion that every human being is created in the image of God? I saw some people didn't put up their hands, but I trust that on the inside your hand is going up. I know what it's like not to want to listen to when somebody asks you to do something. So imagine a community where you turn to someone and say, I see in you the light of God, you are the image of God. You just said it like that. Would that be more kitschy and more hackneyed than just reading a group of prayers that are 2,000 years old that you can't understand because you don't speak Hebrew? I don't know, I guess it's waves. So you said I'm having trouble with connection. All of us are having connection. So welcoming worship might also, and this is part of change also, which is there's going to be an awkwardness when we do things that we feel might be too overt and not subtle. Why should we be so welcoming? It'll push people away. It's too invasive. Or why should we open up the prayer service too much? It'll make us uncomfortable. Or it might make others uncomfortable. We don't want to be too uncomfortable. But in order for things to change, they're going to be a little bit uncomfortable. Some of these things. So let's also talk about welcoming worship in terms of the choreography of prayer. So it's very hard to feel connected to people when they're up on stage. Because the stage already creates distance, which is a kind of fourth wall. So how you set up the room is also part of the welcoming message that you send. If you have a sanctuary that is 1,600 seats and you have 300 people, and they all gather in disparate parts of the room, has anybody ever had that experience? Does that feel warm and welcoming to you? It might feel safe for some people who don't want to be too close. They might be like, oh, I'm in the last row. But having stanchions or having cordoning off an area in front where only 150 people, better to have everybody together in a warm place that creates intimacy than to have this cavernous, huge space. Microphones and music. I talked about how powerful music is. So in some communities, they're used to having instruments, and some people are not. But if we use instruments, it's really important that the way that instruments are used creates a welcoming atmosphere and not a performative. I call prayer, it's pray-formative, but not performative. There's a performative element to it because whenever you stand up in front of people, there's performance. But it's not inauthentic, it's professional, but the instruments have to be, it's not a rock, right? It's not disconnection. There's connection and there's movement. In our community, sometimes in the beginning, when Roma was much smaller, we had a basket full of percussive pieces, and as people came in, we gave them percussion instruments, which was really wonderful, but it was harder to do good music that way. It just was. Engaging community and empowering community to lead services, and empowering community to lead and give Torah and give Tefillah. Those are all important pieces of the next moment, which is welcoming membership. So in welcoming membership, we get to talk about in welcoming membership, we get to talk about expectations of relationship in a community. Both how we invite people to move from community to congregation to join. And here's where we often get tripped up. How many people here have a covenantal or a writ kind of document that members sign? Nobody? Let me read to you from a covenant, a covenantal membership. We have it at Romu, and we're still jiggering with it. This one is from Ed Feinstein in Valley Beth Shalom in Sino, California. It's based on the 5 books of Moses, on the Chamisha Chushei Torah. Gracious, in the beginning, I share the responsibility of creating a community of holiness at Valley Beth Shalom, a community that embraces and embodies the ideals, ethics, faith, and culture of the Jewish people. Shmos, these are the names. I will deepen my own Jewish identity and nurture my Jewish soul through Torah learning, Avodah, worship, Gemilut Chesed, and Chevra, fellowship. Vayikra, and God called. I will answer the call to become God's partner in bringing wholeness and holiness to the world. I will answer the call to repair the world's brokenness and heal its suffering. Bamidbar, in the wilderness. I will seek shalom, the blessings of wholeness, peace, and solidarity in my family, my circle of relations, and my community. And lastly, Devarim, I share the responsibility of transmitting Judaism to a new generation. This is signed by every member. This is from Dan Zemmel of Temple Micah in Washington, D.C. He quotes, Rabbi Shimon taught that the world rests on 3 pillars. We know them, right? Allah Torah, V'Allah Avodah, V'Allah Gemilut Chasadim. This statement represents the values of Temple Micah. We ask each member to participate actively in the life of our community by supporting these 3 pillars. Torah, I recognize that the community prizes Torah learning as a way to nurture the soul and guide our lives. Prayer, I recognize that through prayer my soul can grow in holiness, and so on. It goes through all these pieces. At Roman Rule, we also have a covenant that we ask members to sign, and we have toyed with the idea of having people sign up for days in the month that they commit to showing up for services. Now, you can imagine what my board thinks about that idea. But playing with covenant and choice, because I said we are the choosing people, but we are also the committed people. Na'aseh v'nishma. We commit. We commit, therefore we are. Right? We say yes. And so holding up both in sermon, pedagogically, and in literature, the value in a cultural moment now where choice is relegated to the most supreme value, we double down on both and. The reality of choice makes us want to have the best kind of synagogue possible. The most professional, the most loving, the most welcoming. That is at the core of who we are. And one core principle of our relationship with the tradition is that our tradition says that if you can't commit then there's something lacking in your sense of freedom. That core to freedom and liberation is not freedom from, but freedom to use Isaiah Berlin's beautiful term. Right? Freedom from is Egypt, freedom to is Sinai. When you leave Egypt, you are free, just like every one of us is free here in our culture to choose the direction we want to go in the promised land that is the omega point of our lives. But once we have been called to take up the banner and we feel we move from the community periphery to the congregation, we are now attending services. We ask people to step in as an expression of the Jewish value of chirut. Ein ben chorin ela mi she'osek b'Torah. That to be free is to be committed. That's what it means. Right? And so we ask people to do that. We actually ask them to sign something because there is no such notion in our tradition of a brit without some kind of brit. It has to be concrete, tangible. And you guys can apply this any way you want. It doesn't have to be written down. It can be like, that there's some kind of ritual moment, or you give them some physical expression. We just want to honor this moment. And one of the great things in terms of welcoming membership is that you take the date as a birthday when the person becomes a member of the community, and you send them a thank you letter or some kind of reminder every day on the day of their becoming a member of Temple Ner Tamid. Because why wouldn't you want to be a member of Temple Ner Tamid? I want to be a member of Temple. And so we want to thank you for coming and belonging to congregation or Halei. So these are elements of application. They're not replication. You don't have to have a covenant. You have to say that we want to physically express and call upon our members to step in a tangible way, and we're going to highlight that and make it part of our celebration of your journey. Wow, the day that you joined this community. That's amazing. You might want to have us scrolling on the front screen of it, this is not your yard site, but your shul site. I don't know, I just made that up, but maybe you want to use it. I don't know. It's like, this is the day. This is your Beit Knesset. This is your home. And we want to thank you for that. Okay, some more very clear ideas, and then I'm going to ask some questions, and then I want to show you some stuff from... We ask people to not only covenant with us on about a commitment to the community financially and also in other ways, but we also give out spiritual pledge cards that we ask everybody to sign with their, not their earning statement, but their yearning statement. So on the back of this is our high holiday pledge card, where people can fold them over. I'm sure you've seen these. You fold it over with your pledge, and then it comes with another pledge as well. It's called My Spiritual Pledge for 5778, and these are all sealed and signed and sent in, and we keep them on file for each and every member. This is, and midway through the year, a member of the clergy calls them and says, how's your yearning statement going this year? How's your yearning statement? Welcoming membership, not just covenantal, but improving the volunteer experience. What would it be like if one of our goals as synagogue is to say that every volunteer is respected and lifted up appropriately, and that we expand the circle of volunteers, that every volunteer who comes to give their time, because time is the most precious thing that people can give. Money, people can write checks, but somebody gives you an hour and they don't know what to do in the office when they get there, or you give them menial labor to do. We need somebody to put data into our database. Thank you for being a member of our community. Thank you for your hour. Instead of, a more sacred task that we might lift them to. What would it be like instead of having committees, and this is a whole other piece, talk about this, about committees and ministries. Saddleback Church has no committees. They have 78 ministries. Because committees think and ministries serve. Committees debate and delegate, and ministries, they dispense love. How am I ministering to someone? If every member of our community belonged to a sacred purpose, and because of the sacred mission that the synagogue was, it's a big Knesset, it's a big tefillah, it's a big midrash, It has all three of those, but most importantly, it is the heart of what it is to feel logged on to purpose, meaning, and right, this is my purpose. That's what lifts people up. I mean, volunteerism itself is, all of the studies show what volunteerism does to your body, to your health. It's tremendous. It's better than eating spinach from now until the cows come home. Go volunteer for an hour. It's better than having a macrobiotic diet. Volunteering. But volunteering, where you actually feel a deep connection between what you've been asked to do and how it serves people, is very different than having somebody come in and sitting them in front of the desk and asking them to put in data or answer the phones or whatever it might be. So we need to rethink all of these structures. Do we really need committees? Do we really need rabbis to go to committee work? Rabbis don't go to rabbinical school to sit in on endless committee conversations. Rabbis go to rabbinical school because they want to serve, they want to teach, they want to pray, they want to sit at the bedside of somebody, but instead they get bogged down in the very thing that makes them ineffectual as rabbis, and then they burn out, and then cycle continues. Do rabbis really need to go to board meetings? Maybe not. These are all questions that we should ask ourselves in a welcoming ambiance, a welcoming worship, and a welcoming membership with the sacred at the center. And if we go back to the beginning of tonight, to the fundamental question, which is, I ask each of you to say why you go to your synagogue. What brought you here? We have to ask ourselves, as those who are the stewards of this most important technology called the Synagogue Center. And I haven't given up on Synagogue Centers. I think that there might be a model that works. But I think that ultimately, no matter how good our packaging, no matter how good our marketing materials, no matter how flashy our advertisements, no matter how sexy our synagogue alliterations are, right? Ultimately, what people want is to be touched and to feel more alive when they leave. And that's my assertion tonight. And if we could orient ourselves, not programmatically, but institutionally around that principle, that it's about chiyut, about aliveness. If we could measure at the end of a boardroom, do you feel more alive at the end of this boardroom, more committed to purpose, more committed to making change in the world, and more committed to how Judaism helped make that happen than you did when you got here? That would be a good board meeting, not whether you balanced your budget. Listen, I'm all about balancing the budget, no problem. No problem. Right? It does help. Pamela, you're spot on. But that's the question. And if that's the most important thing, then the questions about tradition and what we hold on to are secondary. Because we can hold on to things from now until, right? That's one model. We can hold on to it because we are surrounded on all sides by dangers. And we're going to hold on to it no matter what. There's that model. And by the way, this might mean that in 50 to 100 years from now, none of the physical structures that we know of as synagogues will look anything like what they look at now. So I'm going to close in a minute, but let me ask the people who are going, okay, I need a question. Any questions, any comments? If you came here tonight and I did not talk about something that you really desperately wanted me to talk about, or you think I avoided, or didn't answer, or think that this was too simplistic, or you loved it, just throw up your hand and maybe I can help. Here. Yeah.
First of all, thank you for a very compelling and provocative session. So my question for you is, there's one thing when you're starting from scratch, how you can create something like this. But when you have an existing organization that realizes maybe it needs to change, but very hard to change, what advice might you have in terms of how to introduce some of these practices so you don't alienate the core of your existing membership?
Right, so this is what Ron also calls, don't leave the savings behind. There's a story about a saving, but we can get it. We have all our savings. So it's the plus kasha. That's the obvious question here, which is if you're starting from scratch, you're what we call, I'm a sole entrepreneur. So you start your own thing, and you have an idea, you have your Shark Tank, I have my idea. What do you do when you have an institution? So there are institutional ways to change. Things do change. And the question is how you allay the concerns and fears of those who are holding on to what is familiar, And how do you introduce something new? So, for example, you could have two minyanim. You could have the traditional service. My friend Adam Kleefeld he's a rabbi in Los Angeles, a really amazing conservative rabbi. And after he and I met in the Hartman Institute 4 years ago, I started, I'm always on my soapbox, so I was telling him all these things. So he said, I've been wanting to do something like that for years. So he started a minyan called Shir HaMalot. He meets once a month, and he's in the service. It's only an hour and 15 minutes of chanting and Torah study. And it's grown and grown and grown. And now he's having a whole conference out there on the future of Jewish prayer in the conservative movement. So there are ways to begin things and to introduce them where you take into account some of the rigidities of a nimitz or a huge ship that has to turn slowly. As long as we do it with love and compassion and with communication and transparency, it's possible to introduce new practices. I mean, there's no doubt we have evidence that supports that, but it has to be done with application and not replication. If you're going to come in and say, oh, I heard Ingber, and now we're going to have electric guitars and drums, it clearly won't work. But listening to people, listening to their fears and to their concerns, and then using some of these techniques and reading these books. I think on the back of your resource sheet there are, right, I can show them right now. Some of the books are absolutely astonishingly relevant. So, Sacred Strategies, Transforming Synagogues from Functional to Visionary. All of these are on the back of your sheets. Right? These books are profoundly practical in how they approach change. Yes. Actually, can I get somebody, does anybody have a question that hasn't yet spoken to me?
One of the things that I find very difficult is I am vice president of membership, and one of the things that I see is we talk about godliness and making fathers. You find members they're there to have their kids educated. They are not. You can't come in. They got soccer, they've got t-ball, they've got sports for their kids. They got and they've got work, and this is not a focal point. Not only is it not a focal point, it's not even a kind of back burner. So this is the big issue for me and for us as a synagogue in terms of how do you engage them.
So it's a good question. So one of the techniques that's been used over the last decade to try to reach people like that is what's called turning the synagogue inside out. Turning the synagogue inside out is to go where people are and not assume that they'll come where you are. So doing a program in people's homes or going to people's offices. One of the biggest things that we did at Roman was to do live streaming on every program, and everything that we do with live streaming. And what was initially there was pushback, it'll inhibit people in the synagogue if they know that we're live streaming. First of all, people forget that we're live streaming. And people are able to plug in wherever they are. I can't tell you how many people have told me that they're watching the class, when they're walking down the street in New York City, that it live streams to their home. Oh, we weren't going to come out tonight to go to Friday night services, but we just turned it on and we were having dinner together and we lit candles and we watched the service and we had a Shabbat meal. So there's a way to use technology. That's part of the same. It's part of the same thing, which is to go out instead of expecting people to come to us. I have friends who have Torah, Mikamoka coffee, they come up with a way to go to a Starbucks and say the rabbi's in, and there's a way of meeting. It's very Chabad-like. They go wherever they are. Now, I also want to say that as a liberal rabbi in the liberal world, the only thing that I ever feel that I have the right to give tochacha on, to give rebuke, is usually political, social action, interpersonal moments. But I think it's a regular part of the pulpit to call on people to step up ritually and religiously. And so I have said, and I say it, with regularity to the community, that if people are not showing up to pray with us, to stand with us when people are saying Morris Kaddish, when the Torah is out, then you're not participating in this community. And I'm critical of that. So we have to be like, in a model of a customer service assumption, we dare not be critical of the customer as long as they're paying their dues. We don't, in fact, if you're a gym, you don't want people showing up. It's good, pay your dues and don't show up. Right? In the model where this is a business model, pay your dues and we'll see you. But in the covenantal model, it's like saying to somebody like, you know, you said you're going to be here, but you never come for dinner. And I'm not guilting you, I just miss you. And what does it mean, right, in a community? How do we create an ethos where we actually expect things of people to come and show up? So again, at first you try positively to say, I'll go find them wherever they are. And then you might say, you know, I gave a sermon where I quoted Mordechai Kaplan when Rome started its Hebrew school. I said, Mordechai Kaplan, the founder of Reconstruction Judaism, said that when you educate children without parents being involved, it's like heating a house with the windows open. And I asked them, who here wants to heat this shul and keep its windows open? So we will not let you drop off your kids at our Hebrew school. If you have to bring, one of the parents has to bring the kids to Hebrew school, and then once they're in the building, we teach them in the building. It's mandatory. And if you don't want to join our Hebrew school, that's fine. But we're not going to build a synagogue this way. Now again, it's different when you have members and cultural shifting is a science. And if you throw it out too quickly, if the rate of change is too fast, it will come apart. But that doesn't mean there aren't ways to change it. And they're subtle and they're structural. And I want to say the last thing I want to say about this piece is that we have to be willing to let the whole thing fall apart too. Like, if we're not willing, even if we have an institution that's 150 years old, but we're so afraid that if we make a change, the whole thing will come apart, then we have to be willing to let it come apart, or at least talk about what would happen if it comes apart. Because Jewish life is dying without synagogues. I'm not being hyperbolic in any way. We've hit a crisis point with synagogue membership and affiliation and engagement, which doesn't mean to say, by the way, that we should respond by fining non-Jews and penalizing them. Rome was proud to be the only synagogue in the country that has hired a full-time Christian minister to minister to our interfaith and interspiritual families. We have a reverend on staff. Her name is Reverend Eleanor Harrison Bregman. She married my dear friend Peter Bregman. We went to Ramaz together. They met at Princeton. She's beautiful. He's handsome. They met. They fell in love. They look alike too. And she's from a family in Georgia that, where her mom was the deacon of the church. And she's a renewal style Christian like me. Like, she doesn't believe any of it is, the theology of the traditional orthodoxy. She's very open. And Peter was going to be a rabbi, but none of the rabbinical schools accepted him because he was married to this woman who was struggling. Should I convert? Should I not convert? She finally decided not to convert because why would you want to? I don't want to convert to something. So she didn't convert, but she loves Judaism. She loves Peter. She's not evangelizing. In fact, she has 3 Jewish kids. All of them have been mikvah, and they all go to Heschel. And she was working at the Hebrew Home for the Aged in Riverdale. And we were starting a community, and it's like everyone who comes in, I kept saying, whenever you show up in this shul, we don't make a distinction once you walk the door between Jew and non-Jew at all. If you were a Christian and you could lead Shacharis, I would let you. Because I would feel honored that you want to daven. I don't assume that the liberal Jew next to me believes the words, who has chosen us from all the people. They have to do inner somersaults intellectually, so why would I assume that this person who professes belief in a Messiah, I don't know what their theology is. And I know the Rambam, I know the Halacha, it's Avodah Zarah, all that stuff. You show up in my shul, radical welcoming ambiance, welcoming worship, welcoming membership means, if you want to honor my ancestors by praying what they prayed, wow, thank you. Thank you. And so we had people coming to our services who weren't Jewish, African American, Asian, from everywhere. And they're like, we love what's going on here. And I said, great, pull up a seat. The more the merrier. I'm not looking at my demographics and asking Stephen Cohen if it's okay. Because God is here when you showed up. And so the same, imagine like a couple comes and says, you know what, I read the story where a couple went to a friend of mine to get married, and he couldn't do it, so he sent them to another friend, and they called him and said, great, Mazel Tov, said, I can't do it. He said, why? Because you're not a member of the shul. They can't marry you because you're not a member of the shul. So my friend said, I don't understand, offer them a free one-year membership and marry them. You want them to be part of your community? Offer all people under the age of 25 a free 2-year membership. And then go prove to them that being a part of this community is the best thing that ever happened to them. Because without it, they would feel less of something. And so it's that way with non-Jews too. It's like, or people who don't identify Jewishly, it's like, come in. We love you. We want you here. And so our job is to go out and find people and help them connect meaningfully. And if they are already part of our community and they refuse to move from being congregants to being core, then we have to call them on that. And that takes leadership and courage and a willingness to fail, right, and have them leave. But they're going to leave anyway. They're leaving anyway. As soon as the kids finish Hebrew school, that guy who always is never showing up for anything, because he's always on at home, he's not staying. And you don't want his money anyway. You don't want his money. So, anybody else? Yes.
I found from my personal observation, I belong to a conservative synagogue, that there's a feeling of that many people have, what they really want is to belong to a Jewish club. They don't want to belong to a synagogue. They like the traffic, they like the programming. I'm concerned about that. I don't know where Judaism is headed. Then why don't we just open up a JCC in every corner?
Listen, I know we have to close because we're running a little later than usual, but that could be the great advocate. That's it, right there, right? If Judaism, if synagogues are going to be what I think were intended to be, they can't lose sight of their mission. And there has to be a way for leaders and communities to remind ourselves of the mission of the synagogue, which is to serve Jewish aliveness or aliveness Jewishly. To serve aliveness, human flourishing Jewishly. And to have programs and styles answer to that core quality. Right? That core quality, or a quality like that you will choose amongst yourselves. But here's the last thing I'll say, because you're all, Marielle and Sarah, thank you again for setting everything up and for the food. I think that the future of synagogues is in my opinion, we're at a fulcrum moment. We're at a point of inflection, and I think that it could go either way. I don't think that synagogues will ever go away. We will always want a Beit Knesset, a place to gather, but we'll also always want the Beit Knesset to also be a Beit Tefillah, a place to yearn together, and also a Beit Midrash, a place to learn together. So those three functions of gathering, which is turning to each other, of yearning with each other, which is prayer, and learning from and with each other, which is learning, which is Torah. All of those are staples of our great inheritance. It's like we're so lucky. Ashreinu matov chalkeinu, mana'im goraleinu, ma yafa yerushateinu. Anachnu mashkim im erev avodah etzarim. We have the blessing to be able to go somewhere and say, how do I honor a baby naming? Can somebody, it's like, can an ancestor give me good advice? Oh, here's good advice. Here's what you do. That's what halacha is. That's what it is. It's like, give me good advice. I don't want to start from scratch. So we're always going to have synagogues. The question, though, will be, what's their function? What's their purpose? What's their telos? Are they just a place for us to gather together like any other watering hole? I think that would be the demise of the synagogue. Is it a place to only have Jewish identity reified? That would also be the demise. Like, synagogue as birthright Israel is also a death knell. They have to be able to hold all of these functions and have all of them serve what it is to become deeply human through Jewish means. And I think that if we keep that as our North Star, then I think the future is looking bright. And so as you leave, I brought Roman, who just engaged in a 3-year process of writing our own new Siddur. Because I wanted our Siddur to be a welcoming ambiance, a welcoming worship, and a welcoming membership experience. All three of those in one Siddur. So it's all fully transliterated, and all the English is poetry that was written specifically, new poetry for the Siddur on Friday night, so that you don't need the margins with all of its little quotes. You could just read the translation and go, wow, that's stunning. So if you could stop by here, I'd love to show it to you. Thank you all for being here.